Hey there, everybody. Hope you're having a good day in whatever corner of the world you find yourself in. How many times do we look back at history and we read about certain events that have happened in the past, certain extremist beliefs, certain ideologies that seem very illogical for today's standards. It would be unacceptable practices today, but back in the day it was seen as normalized in the way the system, the way society worked back then. And it feels like as the years go by, when we look back at 100 years ago, we can judge the things that people in the past did, their decisions, the way society worked. We judge the oppression, we judge the inequality, we judge the unfairness and the disparity that was ever present during that time period. And you can even do that for what was happening 30 years ago, 20 years ago. You can go as far as 10 years ago and be able to see things from a very shifted perspective. How society was working 10 years ago versus how society is working now. And there are certain things that you can judge about how society was working, what belief systems, ideologies were acceptable at the time, and now in 2025 that's no longer acceptable, or maybe things have shifted for the worse, right? We become nostalgic and think back to 10 years ago, and the world was much less chaotic, and how we've morphed into a more, it seems, in the West, we've grown into these individuals that can't come to an agreement because we're so hard-headed on our own belief systems. And that has to do with social media and the algorithm and everything that where we absorb news, and the news is being fed to people in a more accessible way. Whereas back in the day, 100 years ago, if you wanted to read the news, you had to go to the newspaper shop, right, and buy a newspaper. And if you were poor, you didn't have enough money to buy a newspaper, you were uninformed. Or you had to borrow a newspaper from a friend that had enough money to buy a newspaper. But the way we function now as a society is that what's going on around the world is much more accessible to us. And that is a blessing, and that is also a curse, right? It's a blessing because I strongly believe that knowledge is power. And the more you know about the world around you, the more you get exposed to, let's say, different cultures. You see a documentary from a different country in a different part of the world, and they do things a certain way, or there's an indigenous tribe that you learn that lives in some place in South America or whatever, but you're exposed to that. It's not foreign to you. You learn about it. You learn about your world. You learn about this planet that you live in and the different people that live in this planet. And that's a blessing, being able to see what's outside of our circle. But it's also a curse because that information, that knowledge that we are receiving is written by a certain person, by a different person with their own biases. So already it has a filter. Any documentary that you watch or any book that you read or anything that you're exposed to that was written by somebody else, produced by somebody else, is always going to have an inevitable bias. It's going to tilt one way, right? And so it's not a bad thing. It's not inherently bad, because I think that's the beautiful part about society, that we get to experience life in a very unique way. Every human being gets to experience this world very uniquely, not only because of their upbringing, but because everything that they integrate from their upbringing, they get to interpret it a certain way and grow and see the world in a very unique way that hasn't really been experienced, that consciousness hasn't really experienced. So the term bias is very, it has a negative connotation, right? But of course, we're all going to have our bias. When you think authentically and you have an open mind, I am suggesting, or I argue, that eventually, when you integrate all of the information that you've experienced in your life, that you've read, blah, 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 you've done this and you've done that, eventually you're going to come to your own conclusions about what you have absorbed, right? And so the problem becomes when we try to persuade another person that our bias, our perspective, our point of view is the truth, that it's the holy grail, that it's never, like, everybody should follow me because I am sent from the good Lord, whatever, you know? That comes from a place of hubris, first of all, because how can our human mind, we can't understand certain things about our own existence. Like, if we look at it through a scientific lens and we try to analyze, scientists still can't figure out why exactly we dream. Okay? Where are thoughts happening in the brain? Where exactly is the thought coming from? Why do we sleep? There are certain questions that you would think are simple to answer, that would have a simple explanation, but they just don't. And so what I'm trying to say is, it's very pretentious to believe that you know the truth and nothing but the truth, and everybody should follow you because you have the truth. So I went a little bit on a tangent there, but what I'm trying to say is that when you read the news, when you absorb any kind of information, this video, right, I'm doing it through my perspective, through my own bias, through the ways that I've absorbed my experiences and how I've integrated that, and what my conclusions are in the end, right? So anytime you read any kind of information, or you absorb something that you didn't learn about the world, although it's great to learn about how people live in a different part of the world and this and that, because we're so exposed to that information, and because it seems like we're living in a society where a group of people have a very unique way of seeing the world and how it should work, usually to benefit them and their cronies. And so they use the algorithm to brainwash people. There's so much information, but so much of that information is biased, and people usually stop if they already tilt in a certain way, believe in a certain ideology. If they continue to listen to that point of view, if they continue to relate to that echo chamber, they will double down on their beliefs, and that's the danger, right? That's the danger with receiving information from the outside, like, because it's going to have some kind of bias. And if you can't think critically, then it's kind of a problem because you're easily manipulated and you don't even know it. So, where was I getting at with this? Oh yeah, I started this video because, okay, I kind of went on a tangent. Well, to be honest, it's not a tangent. It's just part of the conversation. But I started this video talking about how we judge events that have happened in history, and you can look back as early as 10 years ago and how the world was functioning and what was working and what wasn't working. But now we have the perspective of today, and you know, we in 10 years we've lived through so much as a society. COVID and the great the recession happened in 2008, 2009, but like there are just so many events that have happened that we've experienced as a people, and that we think differently now. I think all of us collectively shift, and it's not a shift that you can notice right away. It's more of a subtle shift, and one day it's a dramatic shift, I think, because I think COVID was a dramatic shift for the whole world. But sometimes you have those dramatic shifts and then you don't notice that you've had that dramatic shift until like years later. And so we're so different than how we were back in 2015 as a people, as a collective. We're so different. We think differently. We have more information about the world. We know more stuff about the world that we live in general. More inventions have come out. AI is something that a lot of people wouldn't have been able to, I'm not going to say imagine, because it's been out there for years and years and decades, really, but that idea. But, and it was in its early stages in 2015, like, by what I mean by early stages, I mean like actually being incorporated into software where they were testing out things. But anyway, but we know so much more now. And so we judge people in the past for the past mistakes. How could our society function that way? Or how could we do this? Or how could 100 years ago people be okay with this and this and that? How could they be so stupid? Blah, blah, blah. And maybe you don't call them stupid, but maybe that's what you think subconsciously or unconsciously. But I wonder what we will say about ourselves. We will say about the way we're living as a collective. I wonder what we will say about society 10 years from now. Like in 2035, I wonder what we will say about 2025. If we judge each other, if we judge our society back in the day, back in 2025, there was some fucked up shit going on, like people were batshit crazy and a bunch of hooligans running the world, you know. Yeah, I wonder if we'll have that kind of perspective, or maybe we'll be like, wow, we were so educated and so hip back then. Who knows? And we don't know really, because we're going to shift. We're going to go through things again as a collective. If you don't think there's going to be a dramatic shift like COVID, there's going to be something dramatic that's going to happen. And we just got to be prepared. We got to learn to love each other and respect each other and accept that everybody has their own point of view, but I still can love you as a human being. And I still can see that you are part of my posse. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what you believe in. It doesn't matter where you live. You're my tribe. You're part of my species. I respect it. And thank you for being here, you know? So in the meantime, we should be doing that, or try, because we're going to go through some big shifts soon, or soonish, or I can't predict. I don't have a crystal ball. Well, I actually do have a crystal ball, but you know what I mean. Yeah. But we're going to shift, and I wonder what we're going to say in 10 years once we're more advanced, and I hesitate to use that word because it's not what I really mean. What I mean is we've outgrown certain belief systems. Just like people in the past, people back in history, society back then has outgrown certain belief systems. We've outgrown so many things, and now we can't even fathom how a society would be able to accept those things back in the day, right? But I wonder if we'll outgrow what belief systems we will outgrow, and what we will say about 2025. And yeah. Anyway, that was my ramble of the day, but I hope you have an amazing day and an amazing life, and I hope you have an amazing journey. Peace and love. Bye.